Hello. My name is Jill Osborne. I am the president and founder of the Interstitial Cystitis Network. We are the largest IC support group in the world with about 50,000 members. And this is one of our twice monthly drop-in IC support group meetings. We normally do our support group meetings the first and the third Sunday of every month. We broadcast them live through Facebook, through YouTube. We will be moving to Twitch. If you could see right here, I actually have a computer set up. We're just about ready to start that. And so my purpose in these meetings is to make you so strong, so knowledgeable, so informed that no one can ever mess with you again. No one can tell you it's all in your head. No one can tell you that there's no therapy. Nobody can say that there's no hope, because we're going to give you hope today. I want to give you hope today. Hello, Heather. Hi. Hi, Linda. Hi, Trisha. Now, if I'm looking up, I'm looking at Facebook. If I'm looking down, I'm looking at YouTube. So, we do these meetings in three sections. Section number one, a little bit of educational information. Section number two is going to be taking your questions. And section number three, which I will throw in randomly, is probably going to be a free giveaway. Now, I want to remind you all that I'm not a doctor. I cannot give you medical advice. My job here is to educate you, is to give you knowledge, to give you information, concepts, strategies. And then I want you to become an expert. I want you to credibility check what I'm saying. And I want you to talk to your doctor too, right? Because in the end, it's you. You're the boss. You're the one who needs to take control of your medical care. You know, one of the things that sometimes patients do is they give away all their power. I don't want you to give away all your power. Ultimately, in the end, you pay them. They don't pay you. That's what we need to focus on. So let's just give it a minute or two, a couple minutes, let some people come in. It looks like we're having some problems with Facebook. I'm not sure why. Hello, YouTube. I see you down there. Let me get that fixed. Yeah. I wonder what's going on. The streams are very, very weird right now. Heather, Linda, Trisha, Carolyn, can you guys see me? Can you please go ahead and say something? Hi, Lisa. Nice to see you. Hi, Kay. Nice to see you too. The really interesting things about these support group meetings is, we might only get 20, 30, 40, 50 people watching it live, but within 24 to 48 hours, we get about 1,000 people watching them. So it's really a great opportunity for some really good educational outreach here. Now, of course, I definitely want to make sure that we thank our sponsor, and our sponsor, of course, is Preleaf. Preleaf is the oldest supplement that has ever been used in the IC world. It's been out for it was around when I was diagnosed in 1993, 25 years. It's an acid reducer. And so if you're going to eat a food that you think might irritate you, it's an opportunity to use something like Preleaf, which will reduce some of that residual acid in that food so that you won't be so irritated. Preleaf comes in sterins and Preleaf comes in caplets. I'm very proud of that, because I will tell you, the IC network would not exist today if Alan Kligerman in 1994 didn't believe in my vision and gave me the seed money to start the IC network. So I'm incredibly grateful to this company. Hi, Mary Lynn. Hi, Ellie. Hi, Jenny. Nice to see you. I've got my desk almost set up. I wish you could see this. I can't turn see if I turn it, then you'll see something I don't want you to see, which is a very messy bookcase. But I have this lovely computer right here, and I can't wait to start streaming on it. Just started setting it up last night. Okay, so let's just kick on in and talk about the educational content that I would like to feature today, and that is the really important question of, why are some patients diet sensitive and others not? I mean, it's the ultimate mystery. Hi, Catherine. Happy Sunday to you too. You spend any time in a support group meeting and you start talking about diet and you start throwing out strategies, there's always going to be somebody who raises their hand and goes, I'm not diet sensitive. I can eat anything I want. It doesn't hurt my bladder. And it really stems from the perception that we've been trying to address now for the last 5 years. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we all thought that IC was an incurable bladder disease. We all thought that the bladder wall was damaged in everyone. We all thought, and here's a really good picture of Hunner's lesions, right? So you can see for the 5 to 10% of patients who have Hunner's lesions, bam, yeah, man, they got a really wounded bladder. You pour acid on that wound, they're going to scream. You put potassium on that wound, they're going to scream, right? But 10 years ago, we thought almost everybody had some degree of bladder wall damage, right? But now we know that's not true. Now we know that that's absolutely not true. Now we know that there's tremendous diversity and variety in the IC patient community. And we saw the signs of it years and years ago. If you could go back into some of the early IC articles published in the 70s, published in the 80s, you would see them describing muscles so tight they resemble piano strings, right? And like every article I read back in those early days talked about, there was this one sentence, this patient has muscles so tight they look like they feel like piano strings. Yet nobody really explored that. Those doctors and those researchers were really interested in what we call basic bladder studies or basic bladder biology. They were really, I would go to the meeting. It was so funny because I went to my first National Institutes of Health IC meeting in 1994. And that was back when the National Institutes of Health held IC meetings every 2 years. All of the big international IC researchers would come and they would all talk about IC. And what I kept noticing is, God, they love the science of it. They love the biology of it, but they didn't necessarily like talking about patient care. I remember going up to one of the directors and said, can we just spend 15 minutes talking about Hunner's lesions and how we're going to treat them? And they were like, no, they were just fascinated by the science, and because they're geeks, they're geeks. It's okay. You can be fascinated by the science. But now we're doing a better job of understanding, I've been a little tongue-tied for the last couple of days, mostly because I worked really long last week. I worked really, really long hours. And I've had this discussion every day with patients. And so after a while, my brain just goes like that. During all of that, as everyone was focusing on IC as a bladder disease, of course, Elmiron came out, right? Elmiron, the only oral FDA-approved treatment for IC. The theory of that was, yes, it is a bladder coating. But here's the reality. A lot of patients didn't respond to Elmiron. Why? Because they didn't have a bladder wall issue. And then, of course, we had the physical therapist step in and say, hey, guys, when you work with those muscles, people get better. So maybe we need to start to work with those muscles. And it was in 2008 when the IC world was absolutely turned on its head, because that was when we had the first formal research study that talked about the role and influence of muscles in bladder dysfunction. And when that study came out, we all had to go, wait, this isn't a bladder disease in everyone. For some people, there's a muscle issue. And that was when the pelvic floor stuff started, right around 2008, 2009, right? And now since then, we're doing even more in terms of understanding this unique diversity. So when you spend any time in a support group, I know, normally I'm not so tongue-tied, but I have, it's just, I'm kind of at a tired point right now. I'm just a little bit tired. I've been doing a lot of work. So in the IC community and in my support group, we very quickly started seeing this diversity. I had patients who were not diet sensitive at all, and I had other patients who were. And when you start talking with patients about what they find in their bladder, that's when you see it even more. Because some patients have bladders that look like this. Other patients have completely normal bladders like me. Both of us diagnosed with IC, yet clearly not the same. Some patients have tight muscles. Others have normal muscles. Both diagnosed with IC, yet clearly they're not the same. Oh, hi, Dr. Gio. Hey, guys, we've got a celebrity in the room, Dr. Gio Espinosa. Dr. Gio Espinosa is the director of integrative urology at NYU, unless it's changed recently. And Dr. Gio is one of those doctors who is very interested in exploring a natural approach to treating IC, an alternative approach to treating IC, and treating chronic prostatitis and prostate cancer. If you don't know Dr. Gio, his website is drgio.com. One of the best newsletters you can absolutely sign up for is over on his website. His blogs are fantastic. So, drgio.com. Okay, so let's get back to this diversity for a moment. You really see the diversity when you ask patients how their symptoms began, because for some people, IC begins in childhood. For others, IC begins after menopause. For some people, IC begins after having a baby. For others, IC begins after falling and hitting your tailbone. Hello, not every patient is the same. Not even close. There's tremendous diversity in the IC patient population. And so what clinicians and researchers have been trying to do for the last decade is trying to flesh out and understand this diversity, because that then helps us understand why some of you are diet sensitive and others aren't. So we call this phenotypes or subtypes. In Europe, there are 16, well, there's 12 core subtypes, 16 if we're absolutely perfect with their system. In Canada, they use 6 basic subtypes, also called U-point. And in the United States, we do not have an agreed upon subtyping system. However, I use the subtyping system that was developed by Dr. Christopher Payne. Chris Payne ran the IC Research Center at Stanford University for 25 years. He was their director of female urology. He is now in private practice at Vista Urology. And he is the one who has created a system which really helps us why some people are diet sensitive and others aren't. Okay. And you guys, for those of you on Facebook, just know it screens by very quickly. And so if I miss your question, please ask it again. But give me a good couple minutes before you ask it again, because the odds are I'm going to get to it. All right. So here's the fundamental issue. Why are some of you sensitive and some of you aren't? And by the way, you know what? I had a flare last night. I have not had a diet flare in 18 months. You know what I had a flare from? I had green tea, a little bit of green tea, and I made the mistake of putting some lemon in it. And you know, my bladder's really healed, right? Normally I can do that. But then I was like, Jill, chill, come on now. You're older. You've got a little estrogen atrophy in your bladder. Thus, my bladder was a little picky last night. All right, so let's get back to that. So in his system, IC subtype 1 is Hunner's lesions. Okay, so that is this group of patients. And Hunner's lesions are really interesting because we really don't quite understand why that lesion forms. Theory number 1 is that it is a nerve that is extremely inflamed. When a nerve is inflamed and irritated, it releases a substance called substance P. Substance P does a lot of tissue damage and creates wounds. So concept number 1 is that it is a neuroinflammatory process. Concept number 2 is that, it might be a virus living on that nerve, because we now have several studies which have found different viruses in patients with Hunner's ulcers, or Hunner's lesions, including the polyoma BK virus, which is a virus we all have. It just gets turned on in some patients, or Epstein-Barr. We even have some information that herpes can exacerbate flares, and maybe even HPV to a certain degree. All right. So I can tell you right now that this patient for sure is diet sensitive. There's no doubt about it. If anybody's diet sensitive, it is the Hunner's lesion patient, because you have the equivalent of open wounds. Now, Hunner's lesions are known for their what we call a stellate appearance. So in many patients, let's look at this one right here. In many cases, there is a center lesion, and then there are lines, red lines going away from the lesion. So this is really the equivalent of a wound. So if you poured acid on a lesion, I can promise you it's going to hurt. No doubt about it. So diet modification is essential for someone with Hunter's lesions. And if you're one of those people where you're saying, I'm not going to let IC rob me of something that I love. I'm not going to let IC rob me of Coke or of coffee. You're going to be the patient that is dealing potentially with long-term chronic irritation and pain. Because if you poured acid on a wound every single day, what do you think is going to happen to that wound? It's going to get worse. It's not going to heal. You're going to interfere with the healing process. And your job is to create an environment that will support healing. Your job is not to provoke. Your job is to calm and soothe, right? So it's very important that rather than looking at IC as kind of a disease process, although if it is infection, that is a disease process, it's more useful to think of this as injury or trauma. Because if you have a wound on your hand, would you pour coffee on it? No, you wouldn't. And if you poured coffee or acid on a wound on your hand every day, what do you think is going to happen to that wound? It's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So if there's one thing we all agreed on 20 years ago, is that the patients who suffer the most, in all likelihood, are the patients who are still having that 1 cup of coffee and 1 soda a day, if they're a Hunter's lesion patient, and somebody's asking, how do we spell Dr. Geo? It's Geo, drgeo.com. All right. And for, I got to tell you, I've met Dr. Geo twice now at conferences. He is a bundle of energy, but his compassion is amazing. He really listens. He's one of those doctors, those elite doctors, in my opinion, where their number one goal is to make you better. And they understand that you have something to teach them. It's not them teaching you. It's always a give and take. And Dr. Geo is such a good listener. He's at NYU. So anybody in New York, there you go. All right, let's go to IC subtype 2. IC subtype 2 in the pain system is bladder wall driven. So these are the patients whose symptoms are coming from their bladder wall. So why would a bladder wall be triggering irritation? Well, here's what it looks like. This is what we call glomerations or petechial hemorrhages. This is an example of an injured bladder wall. The bladder, like any other part of your body, can be injured. There's no doubt about it. So how is it injured? It can be injured through chemical exposure. If you've gone through chemotherapy, anybody who's gone through chemotherapy, sometimes you have tremendous bladder wall irritation because of the toxins of the chemo coming through and sitting on your bladder wall until you can pee it out. If you happen to be a smoker, we know the number one cause of bladder cancer is, in fact, smoking, because those tens of thousands of carcinogenic byproducts, where do they end up? In your urine. And they're like sitting on your bladder wall for hours until you pee them out. Also important that you understand that our bodies were designed thousands of years ago, before we had Coke and before we had juice. So we can successfully argue that maybe our bladder doesn't have as many defenses as we would like for it to have to compensate for today's very high acid diet. Now, this is particularly true for somebody like me who's Norwegian and Swedish. So I go back 5,000 years ago, and what were my ancestors eating and drinking? The world's blandest diet. They were eating deer, they were eating fish, they were maybe eating seals, they were eating berries. They had salt, maybe they had apples. There were no oranges. My family's from the Arctic Circle. There were no oranges up there. So we can certainly argue in my lineage that we certainly didn't have the opportunity to adapt to a lot of acid in our diet, and for our bladder to adapt to that, maybe by, I don't know, creating some more defenses, maybe more mucus or something like that. I don't know. But that's very different from somebody who grew up who was Greek or Spanish. closer to the equator, where you had a lot more fruit, or Latin American or Central American, where you had, and Polynesian and Hawaiian, where you had fruit, you had mangoes, you had papayas, you had all sorts of things that we might necessarily would not have happened in Norway or Scotland or Ireland or Germany or Northern Russia, things like that. So in this subtype, at some point in time, something has damaged the bladder wall. It could be the chemicals. It could be menopause. And although menopause isn't necessarily damaging, but what happens in menopause, and here's a three-dimensional picture of your bladder. So you've got a layer of mucus, you've got a layer of urothelial cells, and underneath that, you've got nerves and blood vessels, right? And here we have the toxins in urine. So if you have an intact mucous membrane, these cannot reach these cells to cause issues. They cannot reach these nerves to cause issues. If you don't, these toxins reach where they're not supposed to go, and they trigger all sorts of inflammatory processes. Unfortunately, for those of us who are menopausal, this nice thick coating of mucus that we call the mighty mucus is diminished because we have estrogen atrophy. This is estrogen dependent. So when you're young and you have lots of estrogen, you have lots of mucus. When you're older and you have less estrogen, you have less mucus. So our bladder's ability to defend itself is different. We call it the genitourinary syndrome of menopause, and that includes our bladder, our urethra, our vulva, and our vagina. Some women who are menopausal notice that when they pee, they get what we call urine burn. As urine is flowing out of their body and across their vulva, it burns them. It's not that your urine is hot. It is that your skin on your vulva is estrogen depleted and getting dry and cannot defend itself adequately from the chemicals in your urine. Okay. The other thing we can see is maybe chronic infection. Some of you might have candida. We know our own National Institutes of Health MAP Research Network found that some IC patients, especially during flares, have candida infections, fungal infections. Some of you might have a chronic, difficult to treat infection or difficult to isolate infection. And, we're trying to step away from the broad strokes. We're trying to understand the diversity, right? So nobody is saying that everyone has infection, just like no one is saying that everyone has pelvic floor dysfunction. I think in the end, we're probably going to have like 25 core subtypes. But there is a subtype that might be chronic infection for some of you. Just like there is a subtype that might be fungal infection or chronic bacterial infection, or even, as this work fleshes out, viral infection. And this is when, if you're one of those patients, you keep getting infection. Real infections cultured out over and over and over, and they keep coming back over and over. Or, you take your antibiotics and then 3 days later it's back, wham, over and over. It would be very interesting to do something called next generation urine testing, because that would help the doctor isolate any drug-resistant genes that you might have. Because if there's one thing we know, it is that antibiotics are becoming less and less effective because bacteria is developing really good antibiotic resistance. I was working with a patient last week about that. Actually, she was really struggling. And in the end, something like this, next generation urine testing, might help your doctor and you understand the bacterial and fungal landscape in your bladder. And if there's anything interesting and unusual happening there that merits some treatment. And we have had, and you can come to a website, bladderhealth.org, to learn more about that. Watch some videos of some doctors who talk about how they use it in their clinic. And we've had here in these support group meetings, we've definitely had patients who absolutely have done this, and that has resolved their issue. It is, or dramatically improved their issue. In our next magazine, I'm actually including an article that talks about 10 variants that are kind of slightly different from this subtyping system that I think you're going to find absolutely fascinating, but I don't want to give it away right now. Okay, but anyway, subtype number 2, bladder wall driven, bladder wall injury. If you have pain as your bladder's filling with urine that is relieved by urination, then you have a bladder wall issue, and diet is going to matter to you. Absolutely. Now, we already had somebody in here say they weren't diet sensitive. So why would somebody not be diet sensitive? Well, because their bladder wall's healthy, like mine for the most part. I mean, I had a hydrodistension 18 months ago. My bladder looks normal, except I'm older. That is so weird. I feel 25. It's so weird. I see subtype 3, pelvic floor driven. Dr. Payne believes that this is the largest subtype. These are the patients whose symptoms begin after a muscle trauma or a physical trauma of some type, having a baby, a car accident, a fall, sexual abuse, some sort of abusive incident, or a history of athletics. That's actually the most common thing, are people who were child athletes, where we see recurring pelvic traumas over time that eventually take a toll. When a muscle is injured, it is weakened. When it becomes weak, it has to overcompensate to do the job it needs to do, so it becomes tight. And then all of a sudden, you've got patients. In fact, Friday, I worked with 2 women who were like this. Their muscles were so tight, even physical therapy couldn't relax them. And one of them, it went back to, what did she have? This is so interesting. She had a couple of really bad kidney stones on one side. No bladder symptoms, just kidney pain. And they did the sonogram and they found the kidney stones. And they did lithotripsy. And the lithotripsy broke up the stones. She peed them out. But from that moment on, she had pain. Bladder pain, bladder symptoms, frequency, urgency. She didn't have any of these symptoms before her lithotripsy. Immediately after the lithotripsy, frequency, urgency, pain. And yet her bladder wall is healthy. And she was one of those patients who her pelvic floor muscles were just locked in a tight position, just locked. And they could barely do physical therapy. And this was it started 15, 18 years ago. And as I was saying to her, I was saying, hon, your muscles have muscle memory. I was, when I was a kid, I was a really, really good tennis player. I got a whole bunch of trophies. I played professionally a little bit. I was pretty good for California. Not good nationally, but pretty good for California. And I trained beautifully. I know how to hit a tennis ball. If you gave me a tennis racket today, I could go out on a tennis court and I can look like a professional. My body knows how to move because I have trained it. Even if I haven't played competitively in 25 years, I know how to hit a tennis ball. Hours and hours and hours of work. My muscle memory is solid. But in some people, your muscle memory kind of goes backwards. If you've had a lot of chronic pain over time, those muscles start thinking they're supposed to be tight. They don't think, but and it's not even a habit. They just stay tight. They are not allowed to function normally, so they kind of lock down. Another way to think about it is the way muscle fibers work, right? So your muscles are supposed to be long and lean, right? But when you pop I have a terrible bicep right now because I'm just at the gym. Okay, if you pop a bicep, hypothetic bicep, it gets bundled, right? Because long muscles do this, and they create it's not a knot, it's just a working muscle, right? Just a working muscle. And normally then they would relax and go back to their long and lean pliant. What's interesting is muscle fibers have little pili that attach to each other. And so your muscles come together, the pili lock down, and you can lift something really heavy and all that sort of stuff. And then normally these pili are supposed to release, and then everything goes down. But for some people, sometimes those villi don't release and you get stuck right here and you get a muscle knot. And you know, if you have a muscle knot in your back, what do? You have somebody push on it, because when you push on the muscle knot, it releases it, right? So what we see sometimes in the pelvis are muscles that are locked down like this. And when muscles are locked down like this, bad things happen because it restricts blood flow and nourishment and nerve function. I mean, if you got muscles like this, they're going to be potentially compressing nerves. They're going to be potentially influencing blood flow to the bladder. They will. And if you look at this, if you grab your arm and you let it go, you see how it's white? Because I'm restricting blood flow. You give it a little bit of time and it comes back. So that kind of process happens with people who have tight pelvic floor muscles. So getting back to our core question here, is somebody with tight pelvic floor muscles, are they diet sensitive? And the answer is maybe not. Their bladder may be completely healthy. It may be their muscles that are the dominant problem for them. Of course, I need to qualify that, because seriously, if you've got muscles so tight that they're restricting nutrition to the bladder, your bladder is going to be vulnerable. Your bladder is not going to have the nutrition it needs to heal itself well and quickly. And so it might be in your interest to at least protect your bladder a little bit. I call it the chicken versus the egg dilemma. Which comes first, the chicken or the egg? And for us, it's which comes first, the bladder or the pelvic floor? For some of you, this begins with a bladder issue. You get a bladder injury and bam, your bladder's screaming and your muscles get tight in a guarding reflex to protect you. So here's a bladder pulsing. You've got pelvic floor muscles right here. They're going to tuck in and try to protect them. We call that the guarding reflex. So for these patients, our number one goal is to calm and soothe the bladder. And when we calm and soothe the bladder, the pelvic floor should also release. But think about the opposite circumstance. What if you're one of those people, you have a nice, normal, healthy bladder, and bam, you fall and you traumatize your pelvic floor muscles and they go like that, right? For these patients, you really don't even know you have a muscle issue. You have no clue, because you might be like the young man I was working with who was a soccer player, a gymnast, and then he was a soccer player. He fell many, many times. So in his case, he took trauma after trauma after trauma. His muscles got weaker, 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 then tighter, tighter, tighter. And then finally something happened, which was the straw that broke the camel's back, and his muscles went bam, like that, right? Of course, his first symptom was frequency urgency. And whenever you have frequency urgency, you think infection. I've got an infection. You call the doctor. Hey, I've got an infection. Doctor throws you antibiotics after doing testing. Doesn't work. You go back. In his case, doctor said you got chronic prostatitis. Put him on prostate medications. They don't work. 3 months later, he goes, okay, maybe you've got interstitial cystitis. Throws him on Elmeron. That doesn't work. Because for this patient, bladder therapy is not going to solve their problem. Their problem is not their bladder wall. Their problem is very tight muscles. Our therapeutic priority for these patients is to relax the pelvic floor. And when we relax the pelvic floor, the bladder gets the nourishment that it needs to be healthy. And when in 2008, when the National Institutes of Health pelvic floor physical therapy study first came out, the results were staggeringly good. That when you relax the pelvic floor for this group of patients, their symptoms improve dramatically. And when Chris Payne proposed his subtyping system, one of the things he ran it on was, were you people being told that this was incurable bladder disease? He said, that's not fair, because some of these subtypes are curable. And pelvic floor dysfunction is potentially curable if you're willing to do the muscle work, and provided it's not a catastrophic muscle injury. But again, many people who come to these meetings report how good pelvic floor physical therapy works for them, right? All right. So if you're not diet sensitive, we're looking at your muscles. That's going to be our most important thing to evaluate and rule out. I see subtype 4 pudendal neuralgia. These are patients who have muscles so tight, they're compromising nerves. It's So these patients tend to have very positional symptoms. They're fine when they stand, but when they sit down, it hurts, or when they bend over, it hurts, or when they squat down, it hurts, or when they lay flat on the back, it hurts. And it tends to be an electrical pain, that sciatica pain that can be shooting down your leg, or it's a nerve pain. It's a more intense, hot electrical nerve pain. And for these patients, in the end, again, it's still not a bladder issue. It is a muscle nerve issue. Primarily, it's a muscle issue. Muscle's so tight that they just have to release the muscle so that they're not compromising that nerve, or at least we're hoping that that nerve was not injured in some way. Okay, and then IC subtype 5 is central sensitization. This is my subtype. So this is the inherited subtype. So IC runs in my family generations. My mother, my sister, my aunt, my cousins, my grandmother, going back, just going back. So what the hell's that all about? Well, for us, we were born with a more sensitive nervous system. And you know, what's really sad here, I mean, there are people in here who you were teased because you were sensitive. You had somebody say, oh, just get over it, you're sensitive. Well, what does sensitive mean? Sensitive means that the action potential of our nerve is lower. It is easier to turn that nerve on. And again, I think it's an evolutionary thing. I think that I mean, what do we know about people who are sensitive? We have very sensitive skin. We tend to be food sensitive. There are some foods that bother our whole body, not just our bladder. For me, it's going to be chocolate or oatmeal, kills me. We can be drug sensitive. A normal dose of a medication is often too strong for us. We have to take half doses, quarter doses. We have a wicked sense of smell. We can smell things other people cannot smell, and smells really drive us crazy. And we tend to be very chemically sensitive. So I think sensitivity is an evolutionary adaptation, because when you had a sensitive nose, you could find food, or you could smell bad food. So I think if we go back over time, the reason why some lineages are more sensitive than the other is really environmental. But we also know central sensitization can happen if you're injured. If you sustain a traumatic injury, you know, those people who, you know, they know a storm's coming in because their knee hurts. Okay, well, why does their knee hurt? Because at some point in time, they hurt their knee. So if you break your knee, yeah, you break the bone, you traumatize the muscle, but you also traumatize nerves. So the thing is bone heals, muscles heal, but sometimes nerves stay sensitive. So central sensitization, or just regional sensitization, or body-wide sensitization tends to make sense for those of us who have that. So why did I have a flare when we know that from food, when we know that my bladder is completely healthy? And that is because I have central sensitization, and I know better than to do caffeine. And yet I did a little bit of green tea yesterday, and I threw in a wee bit of acid on top of that, and throw in sensitive nerves, throw in, I have a estrogen limited bladder. And I think that that's why I had the flare, and I'm fine now. I knew what to do, to drink water, all that sort of stuff. And I'm absolutely fine now. So ultimately, in the end, that is why some patients are diet sensitive and others are not, is because you have different variations or diversity. We didn't even get into gut dysbiosis. We didn't get into the biome. I mean, this is the really exciting cutting edge part of the IC world, is trying to understand what is going on with our biome in our bowel and our bladder. That's something the MAP Research Network is doing. We know that IC patients tend to be deficient in some important good bacteria. We tend to have an overabundance of some bad bacteria. Why? Because if there's any patient group out there who has been overexposed to antibiotics, it is us, my friends. I remember as a kid, when I first had frequency urgency in 7th grade, I remember that I had to swallow like 12 Septras. I mean, at the doctor's office, they were just handing them to me as I was swallowing them. Every time I had a procedure, it was an antibiotic. And that makes sense because procedures can introduce antibiotics. But if there's anybody who has been overexposed to antibiotics, it's probably going to be an interstitial cystitis patient or a chronic prostatitis patient. Here, hold on a second. Let me get a drink. Ava on YouTube says you're going to be back when your wife is back and that you've got some questions, hon. I'd be more than happy to help you offline also. Feel free to reach out to me through the IC network. Catherine says, can you have more than one subtype? I have hunters and PFD. Well, I mean, it's only logical that you would have, you could have one or two subtypes or even three subtypes. So when you've got hunter's lesions, your bladder's screaming, your bladder's in pain. Your muscles are going to get tight to protect you in the guarding reflex. That's why you've got two different subtypes. And it's important to be on top of both. I mean, wouldn't it be sad? So here you go. You've got your wounded bladder wall, and then you've got muscles that are protecting you, right? If you only treat the muscles, but you don't treat the wound, like the lesions, then you're always going to have a guarding reflex. Your muscles are always going to be tight, and vice versa. If you treat the lesions, but you don't take time to address those super, super tight muscles, then it's going to be really hard for both of them to respond at the same time. I hope that makes sense. So I right now am IC subtype 5 for sure. I don't look at that as a disease. That's the gift of genetics and ancestry. It is my job to protect my nervous system. And that's just my playing field. It explains my life. It explains why I have sensitive skin. It explains why I have a sensitive stomach. It explains why I don't tolerate medications well and have to use less, right? But I'm also IC subtype 3 pelvic floor driven because fundamentally underneath it all, I also have a pelvic injury. They think that I have torn my piriformis muscle on my left side probably 3 to 4 times. I remember doing it, and that it's filled with adhesions. It's filled with adhesions in there. I also have a lot of adhesions right on the inside of my left hip bone. So, just to kind of think about this for a moment. So, okay, so here's my hip bones, right? So your bladder is very centered. If you have pain to the left or to the right of center, we're really going to be looking at the pelvic floor instead. And one of the things that's very interesting to do is if you push in by your, I don't think I can demonstrate it. Yeah, I can't really demonstrate it well. But if you just put your hand right on the inside of your hip bone and you push down, if it's tender, don't push down hard. Don't force yourself to endure pain if it hurts bad. But that's often a strong pelvic floor tension site. And that's what we're working on now on my left side. And it's working. Yes, it's working. It's working. It's working. So, I don't think for those of us who are athletes, we understood the toll that what we were doing was taking on our body. And for 10 years, from like 17 to 27, I swam a mile or two, then I did 100 flights of stairs, and then I rode 5 miles every day. And I was at the gym yesterday, and if I'd only knew the damage I was doing, I would not have done that. But it felt so good at the time because, when you're athletes, you love the endorphin, so you love to work out. All right. So, hey, for those of you on Facebook, could you please let your friends know that we're doing the support group meeting? That would be great. If you could post it on your Facebook feeds, that would be wonderful. So I hope that I've answered that question now. Why are people diet sensitive and why are people not diet sensitive? So if you're not diet sensitive, it is time to look beyond the bladder. Let's look at your muscles and see if your muscles are playing a role in your symptoms. If you are very diet sensitive, for God's sake, don't abuse your bladder. Don't keep pouring acid on it. Your job is to create an environment that will support healing of your bladder. Alrighty? All right. I have some really bad news to share. Really, 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 really stunning frustrating news. And that is Liris, the only treatment in history that has healed Hunner's lesions, has been deprioritized by the company. They've walked away. And they let me know on Friday. I've been trying to find out what the hell was going on with Liris. It's so important for Hunner's lesions patients for us to finally have a treatment that heals Hunner's lesions, right? Not in everybody, but in a lot of patients, the Liris therapy healed lesions, reduced the number of lesions in a bladder, reduced the size of the bladder. So promising, so freaking exciting. Allergan bought it from I think it was Terrace. And when, Allergan is the company that made Botox, right? So the $1 billion company, they want, bucks. They saw this as an opportunity to make some bucks. And Liris as a technology can change the way we treat bladder treatment. So Liris, think about what's the ultimate problem trying to treat a problem with the bladder is how do we get medicine in the bladder to stay in the bladder? It's hard because you pee it out, right? So what Liris does is it's like a soft, hollow piece of spaghetti filled with medicine. They slip it into your bladder through a catheter, and then it kind of knots itself. We call it the lidocaine pretzel. It will stay in your bladder for 2 weeks where it delivers medicine 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it was invented for pain. And the medicine they chose to use was lidocaine. And they were stunned in the very first study done up in Canada by Curtis Nickel. I think they had 12 or 13 patients in that first study that every patient with lesions had their lesions disappear. The quote in the research study was a complete and total resolution of the lesion. Stunning. Stunning. And they all went, oh my God, we didn't expect that to happen. And so they kind of refocused and decided to also pursue Hunner's lesions, not only as a bladder treatment, Liris, not only as a bladder treatment, but as a lesion treatment. They did their preliminary studies. Then Allergan bought it. And we were all excited because Allergan had lots of money. And we were thinking, all right, great. If anybody's going to get this through FDA approval, it's Allergan. I did their clinical trial recruitment for them. Worked my butt off because this is so important for the IC world. We went through several rounds of research studies. They were all positive. There were some problems with the clinical trial recruitment criteria. Doctors were a little frustrated with Allergan and the researchers for the way they were doing it because we had so many patients participate in the early studies. And when Allergan brought it and started their studies, they didn't want any of those old patients to participate in the new studies. But the problem is there's not a lot of lesion patients, and a lot of you had already participated. And so they excluded you. And then the next problem with the study is they didn't want patients who were taking pain medicine, which told me they didn't understand Hunner's lesions hurt like hell. And you're telling a patient with lesions, a worse form of IC, that they should not be using pain medicine. It's like, hello, you do not understand this patient community. So for about a year, that limited clinical trial entry. Then finally, I chewed them out one day. Other people chewed them out. They went, okay, if you're using pain medication, you can be in this study. And then there was an issue with, I had a patient call me from LA, and the doctor doing the Liris study wanted her to do a hydrodistension without anesthesia. Wanted her to do it in the doctor's office. And she's like, oh, hell no. Hell no, you are not touching my bladder without anesthesia, which of course any Hunner's lesion patient would stay because Hunner's lesions hurt. So the point that I'm trying to make is is Allergan didn't quite understand the patient population. They didn't, as they were setting this up. And I think in the end, it just didn't, I think that they're going to probably use it instead as a treatment for cancer or treatment for UTI as a better way of delivering medication to the bladder. But we got screwed. We were fucked. I'm sorry. God, it pisses me off. You know, it really pisses me off that you had a treatment that was healing you and they have abandoned it. I want to cry. I mean, I don't know if they're abandoning. I mean, it's deprioritized. So I sent him an email. I sent the research director an email and said, what the hell does that mean? Please tell me what that means. And they did not get back to me. My second question to him is, can we as a patient community appeal to the management of Allergan? And I'm waiting for an answer to that. So I promise you this. If he responds to me and tells me who we can email, we're going to do an email campaign like nobody's ever done in the IC world. We are going to pound that company to get them to reopen this study and to consider using this device again. I think in the end, I just don't think they had enough patience because their clinical trial requirements were kind of wrong or just insensitive or unrealistic. And the IC patient community and the Hunter's lesions are really considered a rare disease. And I just think in the end, they didn't think they were going to make any money from it. Yeah, Catherine says a board of directors, possibly. Give me another week or two. Let me try to figure it out. I hope he responds to me. It took him about 2 weeks to respond to my first email. Hopefully I'll get an answer for you for the second one, okay? And I mean for my second email so that we can, and maybe we'll dedicate IC Awareness Month to it this year. You know, but I'm not walking away. I'm not walking away, and I don't want you to walk away either. I do not want you to walk away either. We are going to kick some butt if we need to, and if not, beg and plead for them to do this. But we're going to need to strategize about it more. Okay. I mean, I need to bring in a consultant who can help us with FDA approvals and all that sort of stuff. I don't think that they would sell the technology. I wonder if we could get a company to license the technology to use it. I don't know. I don't know. We got screwed. Every word you can use, we got screwed. Not for lack of trying. I worked my ass off for 5 years. I did so much stuff for free for those companies because it was so important to you. So in the end, okay. Hey, I got to go get a sweater. I'm a little cold. Give me a moment. I'll be right back. And you watch, I'm going to be hot in about, I'm going to be hot about 15 minutes and have to take it off. Okay. Good night. That's what I say when I'm frustrated. I say good night. All right. It's time to take your questions. I'm looking at YouTube right now. You guys, Catherine, you're not the only one. We are devastated. I'm not just devastated. I'm pissed off. Kratom Butterfly on YouTube says, Kratom really helps your IC. Do you know anything about that? I'm diet sensitive. We talked about that last week. Kratom, people can Google it to learn a little bit more about it. Unfortunately, the FDA has issued alert after alert after alert about Kratom. And so it's not something that we, that we promote. You know, we just don't have good safety data. What's happening to my hair? Oh my God, that's funny. Okay, let's go up to Facebook now. All right, guys, hit me with your questions. Hit me with your best shot. See if I can get myself untongue-tied. Heather makes a good point. You know, you're talking, getting back to the diet discussion. She said, you have to give up stuff you love if you want to get a little bit better. I gave up so much I love because of migraines. So trying the IC diet sucked, but I found my few triggers and didn't lose as much as I thought I would. That is awesome. You know, remember the diet. It's a 3-column diet, right? So we've got bladder friendly, try it, caution. So the caution foods are the foods pretty much everybody with lesions and bladder wall issues should avoid. The try it are foods that bother some people some of the time, but the odds are you're going to be able to eat 80 to 85 to 90% of the try it foods. You just have to do your work to figure out what bothers you and what doesn't bother you. And the bladder friendly foods are usually the foods which work for everyone. But of course, some of you are very unique and some of you have completely the opposite diets that we would normally expect. So some of you, a few of you might actually find some of the bladder friendly foods to be irritating, especially if you have a food sensitivity to it. If you have a previously undiagnosed food sensitivity to one of the foods on the bladder friendly list, that you might have an issue with that food. I had one lady, she called and yelled at me. She was really upset. Her elderly mother had just been diagnosed with IC and she tried the IC diet. Didn't work for her at all. Then she had food sensitivity testing, and the food sensitivity testing found that her mom was actually sensitive to some of the foods on the bladder friendly list. And she called and yelled at me. And she said, you shouldn't have told us to eat in those foods. And I was like, honey, it wasn't me. It was the research studies, number one. But number two, your mom had diet sensitivities that no one could have guessed. That's the due diligence you have to do to find out what your unique sensitivities are, right? Right. Facebook, you know, Facebook seems a little wonky to me right now. All the numbers are different. I can't really tell how many people are in the room. I'm sure it's seeing lots of people joining, but it's not reflecting on the numbers. So I don't know. Hi, Colleen from Frostburg, Maryland. So Heather over on Facebook says that pelvic floor is definitely, she feels it's her subtype for a number of reasons. She was an athlete as a child. She had a car accident, a vaginal birth with a 9-pound, 14-ounce baby. Muscles are always tight. And that your therapist is always struggling to calm your muscles. That's really common. It's way more common than we realize. And, you know, it kind of breaks my heart going back 20, 30 years, all those patients who were being told to take Elmeron and follow the diet when neither one of them would have helped their fundamental issue, which was muscles. Marilla has a weak pelvic floor. Sandra, thank you. Thank you for the hair thing. New year, new Jill. I'm in a really weird place. I'm in a really weird place right now, personally. You know, it's just kind of going through the cancer and the surgeries and then the fires and then caring for elderly parents. I've kind of hit that point where I can't, you know, I'm kind of like at the working 2 full-time jobs, not getting enough sleep mode right now. And it shows. There are times when it shows when I'm just not speaking clearly. Normally I can really speak clearly, but if I don't get good sleep, and I haven't slept well for the last couple of nights, so like getting to bed at 4 a.m. Hey, so let's talk about sleep for a moment. When my bladder pain started, when I was 32, 33, it was always the worst at night, always. And so and you know how it is where you're laying in bed and your bladder's throbbing and you have frequency or urgency, you get up, you lay down, you get up, you lay down. And when your bladder's screaming, you just can't sleep. And of course, that's when we throw in a heating pad, use muscle relaxant. It's stuff I didn't know back then that I know now. But what happened to me, and I still deal with it now, is I kind of got afraid to sleep. And so I would go to bed later and later and later and later. And so before I knew it, I wasn't going to sleep until 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. or 4 a.m, right? And, sometimes sleep didn't happen regardless. And so I dealt with that for a couple of years, and it kind of went away. It all came back with uterine cancer. And now I don't get to sleep until 3 a.m. And that, which is really bad. I'm lucky if I get to bed by 1:30. But even then, I don't know. It's so weird the way that happens. So, and there's another reason why, and that is before the fires, I went to bed early and I got traumatized. So I'm kind of back into that being a little afraid a little afraid to sleep mode. And I understand it and I recognize it. And I know what to do and I'm trying to do it. But we're all fragile. We all have our own issues. And that just happens to be one of my issues. I just have moments when sleep normally when I sleep like a log. It's just getting to sleep. It's the challenge. All right. Heather asks, so is IC an autoimmune disorder? So Heather, actually, very, very interestingly, I emailed Dr. Payne and I asked him about an autoimmune subtype. I said, well, can we firmly say that there's an autoimmune subtype? And he said that there is absolutely no consensus yet. There's certainly a group of patients who have autoimmune disorders like lupus and Sjogren's syndrome, but it's a very, very tiny, we're talking 3%, tiny population, tiny group of the IC patient population as a whole. We certainly cannot make a claim that all of IC is autoimmune in any way, shape, or form, especially and as typified by the pelvic floor muscle issue. My doctor who diagnosed my IC retired. He was a urogynecologist, now having a hard time finding one in my area. What kind of doctor do I keep up with? A urologist, urogynecologist. Look at their website, see if they have an interest in interstitial cystitis. We have fixed our doctor database. It is not active yet on our website, but it did get fixed on Friday. So I just am missing that little tiny piece of code to put on the website so that people can see it. So hopefully I will have our doctor database on our website up soon. Heather says, let's loudly and respectfully protest it on all of our available platforms. Yes, but you don't do it yet. We have to work together as a team. I'm going to lead this effort. Please do not start attacking Allergan or anyone until I get more information. Okay? Trisha just wrote a beautiful message on Facebook. I think she's left now. Do not give up hope. I suffered terribly with Hunter's ulcers for 15 years. She went into remission 7 years ago with cranial sacral pelvic floor, physical therapy, hydrodissensions, bladder installations, no Liris. And she also has Sjogren's, and that that's something that Dr. Payne talked about with this autoimmune subtype. So more on that later. We just can't make a blanket statement about is IC autoimmune. Aaron, if you have a question, if you aren't diet sensitive, should you stay away from strawberries and grapes, things with a little acid but aren't horrible? I think you need to up your nutritional game. I have no problems with you eating strawberries or grapes. They better be organic, because the most pesticide contaminated fruit last year was indeed strawberries. And grapes that are imported from other countries are just covered with pesticides and other toxins. So I really like the Environmental Working Group, which is ewg.org. They release every year the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15, where they look at our government's own safety testing, chemical testing of imported foods and fruits to see which ones are the safest. And we should have the new one for 2019 in 2 months, but let me just blow your socks off and let's see if I can find, let me see if I can find their 2018 Dirty Dozen. You're going to be stunned. All right, hold on a sec. I have to find Dirty Dozen 2018, not Dirty Dozen 2016. All right. Wait. Okay, yeah. So the strawberries last year were the most chemically contaminated. 1/3 of strawberry samples analyzed in 2016 contained 10 or more pesticide residues. 98% of samples of strawberries, peaches, potatoes, nectarines, cherries, and apples tested positive for a residue for at least one pesticide. And we're not talking on the skin, we're talking in the meat. We're talking in the fruit, in the body of the fruit. Spinach samples had on average twice as much pesticide residue by weight when compared to any other crop. Avocados and sweet corn were the cleanest. Less than 1% of samples showed any detectable pesticides. More than 80% of pineapples, papayas, asparagus, onions, cabbages had no pesticides. Let's see. This is freaky. From Harvard Medical School, women who reported eating 2 or more servings per day of produce with higher pesticide residues were 26% less likely to have a successful pregnancy than participants who ate fewer servings of those foods. Male participants who ate high residue produce had poor sperm quality. Okay, so you can read about that at ewg.org. So getting back to your question, you want to eat strawberries and grapes? That's fine. You better eat them organic. Melissa says, what's my opinion on long-term pain management meds for the treatment of interstitial cystitis, pudendal neuralgia? It's real. It's necessary for some patients, especially somebody with a pudendal neuralgia, if they have a damaged nerve. You know, the American Urology Association is remarkably compassionate for the treatment of pain. If you read their guidelines for IC, they want pain assessed at every appointment. They want pain treated compassionately. They support the use of opiate medication, but they want a multimodal approach to pain care, which means we're not just going to do that. I mean, seriously, if you've got tight muscles and you're treating them with pain medicine, you're a fool. These tight muscles need to be treated with pelvic floor physical therapy and muscle relaxants, medical marijuana. So sometimes patients forget that we have to focus on the source of the pain. So as an example, if you have intense pain and have Hunter's lesions, the question I'm going to ask you is, have you had your lesions treated? because we know when lesions are treated correctly, pain reduces dramatically in about 85% of patients. So you wouldn't need to be on OxyContin potentially if your lesions were treated with a steroid. So, and again, we're going to work with muscles, with the central sensitization. We're going to make sure that you're not provoking those nerves. And then we also want to make sure you know how to use your pain medicine properly. Some patients make a strategic mistake with pain care, and that is they wait until they're crying before they use pain medicine. But treating pain is like fighting a fire, man. You got to catch it when it's small. If you got a fire, listen, if this little piece of paper was on fire, I'd throw it in the trash can, pour a glass of water on it, it'd be out. But if I let this piece of paper catch my entire office on fire, that's going to be a hell of a lot of water to put that fire out, right? So your goal here is to catch the pain as early as possible with the least amount of medication. You want to get ahead of the pain. And whether it is a traditional pain medicine, whether, I talked about that in our last support group meeting. Opiate medications obviously are very scary for a lot of doctors to prescribe right now. They're worried about addiction, but you have to understand the different types of opiates. There are short-acting opiates that only last for 4 hours, like Norco or Ultram. And then there are time-release opiates that can last for a long time, like OxyContin. And then there are opiates that are really, really strong. They can knock an elephant out, like fentanyl, that are really, really addictive and really, really dangerous. So we don't want you to start with an elephant narcotic. We want you to start with the mildest opiate possible, which is going to be a little 4-hour opiate like Norco. And again, maybe you're not going to use a whole pill. Maybe you're going to use a half a pill or a quarter of a pill. I would encourage you to watch our last support group meeting where I talked about that quite a bit. But I mean, pain is real. IC pain is real. Bladder pain is real. It is characterized by being relentless and difficult to ignore. It just pounds away at you. Unlike if you fell and skinned your knee or you cut your hand, you would feel that pain for an hour or two and it would go away. Organ pain is different. It tends to be a bit more on the relentless side. And there are moments when getting some pain care is important. Now, the question is what can you do if you don't have pain care? And that is when, number one, you got to, seriously, if you don't have access to pain meds, then please, please, please don't be drinking coffee and soda, which we know are going to trigger pain if you're IC subtype 1, subtype 2. Using heat or cold, using a muscle relaxant, using an essential oil. I am the Tiger Balm queen. I love Tiger Balm. If you don't know what Tiger Balm is, it is, here, I'll go get it. Oh, where is my other one? There it is. So this is Tiger Balm, and it is it's like Vaseline, and it smells like hot, sweet Vicks Vapor Rub. And boy, it'll clean out your, you don't really want to do that too much. You certainly wouldn't necessarily put it on the front of your body because aroma would come up. If you're smell sensitive, it might be an issue. I put this on my left butt cheek for my muscle injury. So this is viable. And then we also have Pro Serona and NeuroQuell. This one is the NeuroQuell. I don't know if you can see that. This is the essential oil of the marigold plant. It was the Endometriosis Association who helped invent this and discovered that when this is rubbed into the skin, it also tended to disrupt some pain processing, neurological pain processing with no side effects at all, unless you're really sensitive to the smell of marigold. So you want to do something like that. And then also medical marijuana. Medical marijuana is continuing now to get very, very good reviews, providing that you get a good brand that is not contaminated with pesticides. But even at the American Urology Association conference, in their class on pelvic pain, they specifically talked about Fairwinds Cannabis, who makes medical marijuana suppositories, a vaginal suppository for women and a rectal suppository for men that is getting really, really good reviews. And if you get our magazine, the IC Optimist, this was my summer magazine where I highlighted it, and it was Jennifer Fariello in the class, and she specifically said, Fairwinds Cannabis infused vaginal suppositories that are called Feminine Relief and rectal suppositories that are called Rectify. But again, now the big thing with medical marijuana is you got to look at the testing results. When you go into a dispensary, you don't just pick the first brand. What you say is, all right, can I see the testing results from this company? I want to make sure that this is not contaminated in any way with pesticides. And if they do not have testing results for any of it, you walk away. You have to have testing results to make sure that it's pure. Do not believe them. You want to see it in writing. Okay. All right, let's keep going with your questions here. Melissa, somebody probably already told you, but they have basically discontinued Liris, the only treatment in history that has healed Hunter's lesions. It's been deprioritized by the company, and we're pissed. Cheryl says, has anybody here had their bladder shrink? My bladder has shrunk after 15 years of IC, so I'm going to the washroom all the time. Remember, your bladder is a hollow organ that is meant to expand. It's kind of like a balloon. So it starts small, and then as your bladder gets fuller and fuller and fuller, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then when you pee, it all collapses in on each other again. The bladder elasticity is affected in a couple of different ways. If you have scars, then those scars are not going to stretch as well. Inflammation, other things like that. But Cheryl, provided you're not dealing with pain, what doctors would recommend is something that they call a bladder holding protocol. Where you do what basically timed voiding, where if you're peeing every 15 minutes, what they're going to do is say, all right, hold it for 20 minutes and do that for a couple of days. And then, okay, hold it for 30 minutes and do that for a couple of days, and then work your way up. But what they don't want you to do is do it to the point that your bladder's hurting, because then you're completely counteracting what we're trying to do. Anytime you trigger pain, then we're triggering muscles to get tight and other stuff like that. So you only do that when there's no pain involved. Yeah, I think I think the lack of sleep is definitely coming to affect me. I didn't get sleep last night. Again, probably until 2:45, 3. And my body loves sleep, man. If I'm sleeping 9 hours, that is a good day. That is perfect. 10 hours, great. If I have less than 8 hours, I am not functioning well. Renee says, did you say, for instance, if we have subtype 2, we can cure IC by not drinking coffee? No, that's not what I said, because IC subtype 2 has a lot of different variants in it. There are subtypes. Some subtypes might be more curable than others. If, for example, you have estrogen atrophy, that's not a disease. That is just the state of being old. We don't have to cure we cannot cure aging, but you would be using perhaps a vaginal estrogen that would help your body produce more mucus. If, for example, you have a chronic infection, and if that infection or chronic fungal infection, if that infection is in fact treated and eliminated, that we could potentially call that a cure. If you have chemo-induced cystitis, where you've got a bladder that's been damaged by chemicals, healing is always happening. Hopefully we can get that bladder to heal. But there's, I disagree with the word cure for an injury. You don't cure an injury, you heal an injury. And a lot of these subtypes are more injury driven than disease driven. Sarah, what happened to the Elmeron eye issue? Sarah, the Elmeron eye issue is big and getting bigger, and we're getting calls all the time. I had a phone call last week from yet another patient who, and also from an eye center, from another patient who was stunned. She was crying in the car as she called me back because they found that she had pigmentary maculopathy, which is colored retinal cells. She wasn't showing any severe eye dysfunction yet, but they found the beginning of it. And thank God as I said to her, I said, girl, this is good news, because now you know it's there, and now you're going to stop this medicine so it will not get worse. So more to come. Emory has been doing more studies. Our study is continuing. I can look at it right now, as a matter of fact. Let me take a look. Let's see where we are right now in the IC Network Elmeron study. Last time I looked, I think we had 900 patients who had participated. Nope, 895 patients participated in our research study. It's a more patient survey, not a real research study. It's a baseline, very, very introductory study. And let's see where we are. 760 of these patients who took my study, took my survey, are taking Elmeron. They took the brand name primarily. They took it on anywhere from less than 1 year to more than 20 years. And we have a 52% rate, 52.39% rate of eye or retinal illness in ours. Dominant symptom, blurry vision, difficulty reading, difficulty with low lights, dimming vision, blank areas of vision. And 80% of you went to an eye doctor for it. And 70% of you had these symptoms develop while you were taking Elmeron. So that issue continues. I will keep you posted. Aaron, never heard of the Dirty Dozen? Girl, man, put that in your groups. It's huge, 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 huge. I'm telling you, the pesticide, what the chemical industry and Monsanto are doing to our foods is nothing short of criminal, in my opinion. Do you realize? So did you guys see on Friday that a new research study was released about Roundup? And it was something about a 41% risk of nervous system dysfunction. Hold on, let me find it. It was on CNN, and it just, here it is. Here it is. Glyphosate weed killers, also known as Roundup, increased cancer risk by 41%. 41%. Stunning. It's banned in Europe. But, oh, you know us. Money comes first in the United States. Money talks to Congress. And so the industry has been able to keep it on the market by, claiming that Well, you just Google it. I mean, it's just disgraceful what's happening. But let me tell you what's happening with Roundup. So, Roundup became, I think late 1990s was when we all started using it, and they use it in the fields to kill the weeds, but then it killed the plants. So then Monsanto created new variants of plants that were resistant to Monsanto. So they changed the DNA of the plants. I mean, resistant to Roundup. They changed the DNA of the plant to make it less resistant. I mean, to make it more resistant to this chemical. But you know what they're doing now is literally a day before the wheat is harvested, they spray it again with fresh Roundup, because it makes it easier to harvest and maybe a little heavier, that they get more money. I will only buy organic flour now, only. And you can Google it. You can find Roundup in Oreos, in Triscuits, in the favorite foods that we loved, that we grew up with in the 60s and the 70s, are now massively contaminated with Roundup. Cheerios, cereal, because, I mean, it's insanity. So we've got to please educate yourself about it and buy organic, and don't, God, you love your Oreos. I know some of you do, especially the vanilla Oreos, which are much more icy friendly, but read about it because it contains Roundup now. And here's a new research study, increases your rate of cancer by 41%. You're giving it to your kids. I'm trying not to even eat soda crackers unless they're organic. It's just appalling what's happening. And you think about when the first case of IC was described, it was in England between I think 1840, 1850, somewhere in there. Before that, I mean, granted, there wasn't organized medicine so much before that, but I mean, there was, but not in journal form. But if you go back and you look at that original entry for IC back in the 1800s, it is perfect today. Frequency, urgency, pressure, pain. So what was happening back then? In England, the Industrial Revolution, massive pollution, massive contamination. Coal was being burned everywhere. You had ironworks, and it was just a start of chemical exposure. So, I mean, there's still a part of me that's just kind of wondering, is there an environmental influence for some of us? And I do believe that there could be. So, man, we got to clean up your diet. No, you can't use any scented candles from China. No Febreze, no Glade plugins. Get the chemicals out of your life. We don't need that stuff. It's just they're making money at our expense, and it's not right. Heather says, I can see a difference in my pain levels when I take a muscle relaxant. I could not have gotten through my hysterectomy without the muscle relaxant. That's really what helped me. Heather says she's been on the lowest dose of Vicodin for over 5 years, and it does help most of the time. I refuse to up the dose and only take a whole one. Honey, I don't even take a whole one. I cut it in quarters. I took a quarter last night. I was sitting here working and trying to set up this new computer, and my bladder started screaming, and I took a quarter. Renee says, in your opinion, do you think subtype T was brought on by drinking too much soda, or do you think I'm genetically prone to it? I'm struggling to find out why I have this when no one else in my family does. Boy, that's just a really, really good question. I think the most important question, Renee, is do you have sensitive skin? If you have sensitive skin and you have a wicked sense of smell, then that tells me that you have a more sensitive nervous system. Not your fault. You've done absolutely nothing wrong, okay, in any way, shape, or form. Now, I don't believe in assigning blame to anyone. You didn't know that soda was bad. We didn't know that soda was bad. They didn't know that smoking was bad. The companies were just selling the product. They knew it was bad. They didn't tell anybody else for a long time. Same thing is true with soda and with the sugar industry. Man, they know their product's bad. They know their product causes brain chemistry changes. They know that it triggers the same addictive response that cocaine triggers in our brain when you drink a soda. So I don't want you to carry any blame or guilt about that. But what I do want to make sure is you're not giving those companies any more of your money. Oh, I'm not going that's like the best, easiest way to quit something you're kind of addicted to. It's like, you don't deserve a penny of my money for what you've done to my body. I refuse to give you any more money. Done. Over. And that's how I stopped drinking soda. I drink sparkling water now, mostly. Aaron says, how long being on Elmeron will it start to cause issues with your eyes? Well, Aaron, in the original Emory six patient case series, the youngest patient was diagnosed at 24, and she had her first severe eye problems at the age of 36 years. Although the average age in that study was, I'm going to say 15, 16 years. However, in our survey, we had patients who are showing eye symptoms within 2 years. And the Emory eye researchers in their original paper managed to find an early Elmeron study, which I had never seen. It was one of the studies that led to its approval by the FDA. And so it was an up to 4-year study where they found they found several eye side effects in patients who took it less than 4 years, specifically retinal hemorrhaging. And quite a few of the patients who took our eye survey also have retinal hemorrhaging. So it's not as out of the blue as we thought it was. But nobody really ever talked about it before. If you look at the Elmeron literature about side effects, it says nothing about eye issues that I recall. So that's why we have our citizens petition with the FDA to get that changed, to inform patients that eye issues can happen, and suggesting that patients taking Elmeron get their eyes examined once a year. I don't know what's going on with Facebook. Some of you keep logging off and logging on all over the place. I'm going down to YouTube here for a moment. I love that we're becoming so knowledgeable and so formed, and more importantly, that we're prepared to kick some butt. We just need to be empowered here. We need to be empowered. Hey, maybe it's time for a giveaway. What do you think? You guys want a giveaway? What do I have that we can give away? Isn't that a question? Isn't that a question? Well, I'm going to give you the choice. For those of you who've stuck around, okay, wait, I need a Post-it. Oh, hold on. All right, here's my Post-it. I'm going to let you, whoever wins, choose what they want out of the IC Network store. All right? You can't get 100 of one thing. I'm going to send you one of one thing. Okay? So hold on a sec. I'm writing a number down. And one of you said you could see my arm moving. And do you hide it? Okay, I am picking a number between Oh my God. Okay, like really, Donna? Donna, so you guys who've done this before, you know, I always tell you, pick a number between 1 and 100. You can say as many numbers as you want. The first person to get the number gets the prize. Donna, frickin' Donna Townsend, her first guess. She guesses 25. Donna, I've never had that happen before. You won the freebie. I'm going to do, you know what? We're going to do it twice. I'm going to do 2 prizes today. Donna, you have one. Okay, nobody guess. I'm going to do another number. We're doing 2 prizes today. Okay. Hold on. See, now, if I were clever, I'd do 26. Okay. We're doing a giveaway, Crunchy. Hold on. I'm trying to come up with a number. Okay. Okay, the giveaway is going to be anything in the IC Network store underneath $50. All right? So our first winner is Donna Townsend. Everybody start guessing now between 1 and 100. And you're going to help me double check it. I'm looking right now. We're going to feel free to guess numerous times. We'll do it until, and you guys are going to help me make sure I get the right person. One of you was 1 off. That same person was 1 off in the other direction. That's the only clue I'm giving you. All right. Aaron Glidden. The number was 61. All right. So, Aaron, you can go to the IC Network store. Donna, you can go to the IC Network store. That is, just go to the IC Network, ic-network.com. And then you need to send me a message with, tell me what you want. You can be a chair cushion. It can be a heating pad, just one item. It can be Cysto Protect, Cysto Renew, not including shipping. It's okay. Don't worry about the shipping or anything like that. I'll cover that. So your choice. Whatever looks good to you is good to me. All righty. So I've got you written down here. All right. Give me some questions, people. Look, we've been on for an hour and 38 minutes. I got a little bit more in me. Granted, I started slow, but I think I'm in my groove now. Any other questions that I can help you with IC? Donna, if you can email me icnetwork@mac.com. No hyphens. icnetwork@mac.com. I'm also on Facebook. I'm simulcasting both through YouTube and Facebook, so you can do that. Hi, Brittany. I think I got to go to bed earlier. Man, that would explain why my brain gets a little wonky. I am just not getting enough sleep. How does one balance anxiety and IC? Well, I mean, okay, Crunchy, we'll come back on that. You know, anytime you're in pain, it produces stress. It produces anxiety, especially if it's prolonged pain. And so one of the things that I really like to say to patients is, God didn't give you the skills to deal with IC when you were born. You have to learn them. How do you learn them? Well, we're talking skills here. Taking a class in anxiety management changed my life. I did it when I was about 35. It was Phobeas. It was called Phobeas, Phobease. And I think that, and you guys, I have a master's in psychology, and I was on my way to a PhD in psychology when my IC started. And I had trouble accepting that my IC was because of my childhood. And I was always under the impression that the way you treated anxiety is you went to therapy. And I lived in a very loving home. I was never abused, but we did have a problem in our neighborhood. We had a man who raped and murdered my neighbor. So I grew up with a lot of fear around that. We all knew that there was a problem there. And so I had anxiety from a very young age, but I had really dealt with that as well as I possibly could have dealt with that. And what the Phobeas class taught me is that for some of us, anxiety, especially for those of us with central sensitization, IC is a chemical sensitivity. It means that our body is not processing adrenaline well, that we get overwhelmed and overloaded when we have a lot of adrenaline going through our bloodstream. And adrenaline is what makes your heart race. It's a fight or flight response, right? 5,000 years ago, the fight or flight response saved our lives, because if we were confronted by a bear, we ran, or a leopard, or if we had to fight for our life, we fought. Our body is wired to flee or fight. And it does that because you get startled, your body chemistry changes, your blood flow gets diverted from the center of your body over to your arms and your legs so that you can run or you can fight, right? Well, in today's life, we have stimulants and anxiety-producing stuff almost every minute of every day if you're online, right? Like, online is just wicked right now. It's so tragic what's happened with people online, and all the fights that are happening, and the insults and the stress and the scary stories and the untrue stories, all that sort of stuff. So we're getting jolts of adrenaline over and over and over. We got massive amounts of adrenaline circulating through our bloodstream, driving that anxiety, driving that feeling of being unwell, driving a racing heart. It's like you can't settle. So anyway, when I took the class Phobeas, it was created by a surgeon with anxiety disorder for his son who had anxiety disorder. And he said the secret to controlling anxiety is to control adrenaline. We got to get the adrenaline out of your bloodstream to calm your nervous system down, to calm your body down, calm your brain down. So how do you do that? And they gave us just a perfect system, the perfect system to use. But getting started, it's a hard part. Because right now, if you were like me back then, you've got a lot of adrenaline floating through your body, and probably every other thought you have is a negative, scary thought. That's just kind of the way we're wired. And there's actually an evolutionary explanation for that too, that I just read a couple months ago that I thought was fascinating. So anyway, if you've been reading the internet, if you've been watching TV, if you've been driving, you've got adrenaline floating through your bloodstream. So what do they have us do? Every time you have a negative thought, you get a jolt of adrenaline. So that's where we're going to react. So anytime you have a negative thought, you have to visualize a stop sign. Just close your eyes and just fill your brain up with a stop sign for a moment or two. Just like stop, stop. Then take a single deep breath, in for 3, out for 3. That single deep breath renders the adrenaline from that negative thought chemically neutral. It renders it inactive. So stop sign, deep breath, then you minimize the thought. And so you just got to remind yourself it's a thought. It's a thought. So what I say is, oh my God, Jill, you're not God. You can't predict the future. For all you know, that could be a wonderful event. So if somebody says, hey, you want to go to the movies? My answer for 15 years was, no, I'll have to get up. It'll hurt. And now my answer is when I do that, I will visualize the stop sign, take a deep breath, and then I'll go, you know what? I could be a great day. I think I'd like to try it. Right. So anyway, they had us, and guys, somebody just came in on Facebook and they're just being goofy. I mean, on YouTube. Hey guys, listen, John, we are a legitimate support group for people who are suffering right now. They are suffering with terrible pain. And we need you to respect that and not make fun of that. So if you could please step out, I would really appreciate that. Let's not make it worse. Let's not make one of these patients even more ill. And you have the potential to do that if you keep on what you're saying. So if you could please step out, I would appreciate it. Thank you. I wish you well. All right. So stop sign, deep breath, minimize the thought. Now what they say is, they sent us home and they said, we want you to do this every single time you have a negative thought, like the doctor can't help me or the pain will never go away, right? And they warned us, you're going to do this hundreds of times. And they were right, man. When I went to it, because I took the class probably 3 years after my pain started, I was stunned that literally every thought going through my brain was fear. It was fear of everything. So the first day, I think I did that like 200 times. Easy peasy. Then the next day, I did it like 100 times. But the next day, I did it half as much. And by the end of the week, I was only doing it once a day. And I was so much better. Because I had gotten the chemical overload removed from my bloodstream. So I have a video on our website, I See an Anxiety, where I talk about that. But just give it a try. Stop sign, deep breath, minimize the thought. And getting back to this thing about God didn't give you the skills to handle stress and IC when you were born. That's true. You got to learn them. And that was a mistake that I made. I thought I didn't understand that until I took this class, that I don't, they were saying, I don't need to go into your childhood with this. I mean, if you want to, we can do that. But I want to teach you how to control adrenaline, because we think that's what's driving a good portion of anxiety out there. And for me, that was the case. And again, that makes sense with my subtype. I see subtype 5, that I would be sensitive to adrenaline and my body would overreact to it. So think about that. Okay. Catherine said, just to note that my daughter is an eye doctor, and she said to make sure we get an ocular coherence tomography for Elmeron testing. Catherine, I would really love to hear what your daughter thinks about the whole Elmeron situation. That would be fascinating. Again, somebody asked about kratom. Kratom has become a very popular alternative supplement that can be used to control pain. Unfortunately, kratom is very, very concerning to the FDA. Pretty high, if I remember correctly, contamination levels, side effects. So the FDA has issued warning after warning after warning about kratom, about its suppliers, about chemical contamination, about other issues. So at this point in time, I certainly cannot endorse the use of kratom with IC until we get some studies and that show that it's safe and the source of it is safe and that it doesn't interact with other things. So I'm pretty cautious with that. I will tell you, I would never touch it as myself. I just wouldn't. I know my body. I know I overreact to almost everything I try, and I just don't want to risk it. We're working on this new supplement line and it's almost done and it's really, 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 really exciting. And yet they sent me a sample, an early sample. And even then I had the bottle. I was like, do I want to risk it? I'm just really sensitive to stuff. And the answer is, yeah, I want to risk it. Everybody's pretty excited about it. We got doctors now doing studies with it. One of the biggest IC doctors in the world has helped to create it. It's very, very exciting. And hopefully I will have it in 2 to 3 weeks. And then we'll be able to talk to you a little bit more about it. It's helping with pain for some patients too. Brittany, something about wondering if you knew hydratinitis in IC. Is that how you spell it? Hydratinitis, or is that tinnitus? Hydratinitis. What is? I have never heard of that. Is it a bacteria? What is it? Hydratinitis suppurativa? Is it what? I've never heard of this, hon. What the hell is it? Is it an infection or is it it's a boil? Oh, here we go. I had it spelled wrong. It's not a Y, it's an I. Hydradenitis. The chronic condition characterized by swollen, painful lesions occurring in the armpit, groin, rectum, and breast regions. The disease occurs due to an obstruction of hair follicles and secondary infection, and sometimes inflammation of certain sweat glands. I have never heard any patient, obviously, talk about this before. However, I have worked with a couple of patients, including one last week, who they sweat constantly. They've got a disorder that makes them sweat constantly. I just don't have any info for you here, hon. I'm so sorry. Authors advocate long-term treatment with systemic antibiotics like tetracycline. I'd like to hear more about it, hon. I would love to talk to you next week about it and hear more about it. Hear when it started and how that's affecting your IC and all that other stuff. All right, my friends. Well, listen, it's almost been 2 hours, so I think it's time to wrap this up. Now, listen, so last call for questions, last call for questions. Last call. And maybe I'll take a nap. I probably need to eat something. I haven't eaten anything all day, and it's 2:30, and all I had were a couple bites of cantaloupe. I probably need to eat something too. You think? Yeah, I think. So listen, if there is one thing that I want you to remember from this discussion is that none of this is your fault in any way, shape, or form. I don't want you carrying any shame, any blame, any guilt because you have this. You are no different than someone who was hit by a car. You're hurt. And just the way you would love on someone in your family member who is hurt, I want you to receive the same love. I don't want you to feel like you're not deserving of the love and support and companionship and friendship and kindness of the people around you. And tragically, that's kind of what happens when you have, quote unquote, a chronic thing, especially a chronic embarrassing thing like this, is our negative self-talk gets pretty low, and we start thinking that we're damaged goods and we're not worthy. And then we start hiding, and then we stop socializing, and then we lose contact with our friends. And then we've got a family member who says something stupid that offends us, all that sort of stuff, right? You think, hey man, I've lived this. I know exactly what you've gone through because I've gone through it. But in the end, you have done nothing wrong, just like I have done nothing wrong. And I don't want you carrying any shame or blame about it. All right. But what I do need you to do is I need you to be proactive. I need you to be assertive. I need you to be aggressive. And I need you to love on yourself what you deserve. Right. And so that didn't come out right. See again, a little tongue tied. Every day I need you to do 3 things. For 15 minutes, I need you to do something for your spirit, something that gives you comfort for your soul or your spirit. I don't care what it is. If you want to go out and walk in nature, go sit in the sunshine, go to church, whatever. Do something every day that nourishes your heart and your soul. Okay. I need you to do something every day for your bladder and your pelvis. Whether it's your pelvic floor physical therapy, which I did yesterday, but I have not done yet today, whether it is passing Starbucks, whether it is buying some organic food, fixing an IC-friendly meal, do something that you know will only help and not hurt healing in your body. And then last but not least, I need you to work on your noggin here, hun. I need you to build your knowledge of IC. As I've said before, nobody can ever tell me IC's in my head. I will kick them in the butt, literally, with facts, with research studies, with the MAP Research Network, with the AUA guidelines, with everything I need to educate them. And I want you to be able to do what I can do. And it begins with your knowledge level. I want you to start reading, and don't read Facebook. Don't go into the support groups and expect them to give you this knowledge. I need you to go to auanet.org and read the actual IC guidelines. Come to our website, read the blogs, read our magazine. Come on. We've got this fantastic magazine that goes in depth into these core issues with IC. Let's up your game here, up your knowledge level, okay? So if you find these meetings helpful, you can support these meetings by becoming a member of the IC Network and getting our magazine. We've been doing this for 15 years. We're just finishing up the winter one right now. Very, very excited about it. Also, talking about fibroids in that one. We now know that fibroids can put a tremendous amount of pressure on the bladder and on the bowel. And we now know that when those are treated, we have a cure rate of 65%. All right, my friends. So anyway, that's it. I wish you well. I hope that you guys have a wonderful day. And as always, you can reach out to me directly through the IC Network website and or our Facebook page. But it is time to say goodbye. I'm going to go watch the last part of the Daytona 500 with my dad. So I wish you the best, guys. See you later. Have a good one. Goodbye, Facebook. Vector, dude, listen, I got to tell you, this is a support group for people who have terrible pain. In some cases, they are homebound, bedbound, struggling to live. And this is a real support group meeting where we're trying to give them comfort, love, and support. And so we really need you to respect that and to not make it worse for these patients. I've got guys from NFL football players to kids in high school who have terrible injuries, who are trying to find a way out so that they can function again. And what you say can help them or hurt them. And what you just said would hurt them. So I need you to be respectful of that. All right. Okay, good people. See you later on YouTube. I'll see you in 2 weeks. See ya. Bye-bye.